My biggest fear would be when the first comes and I don't get the rent.
I found that my tenant had dumped concrete down my toilet. Can you believe Fair Housing fined me $5,000 for that?
And how do you onboard your tenants? What do you do?
I don't even know if I do it right.
If you're a landlord, don't just rent perfect. The Rent Perfect podcast with property expert and private investigator, David Pickron.
Well, hello, and thank you for joining us today at the Rent Perfect podcast. Got Scott here with us as always. We're certainly thankful you're here. Love to hear from you. Love your comments. Like and subscribe, please. Hey, it's a special time of the year, Scott.
Yeah.
You know,
I love this time of the year because everybody's doing their 2022 recap.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like I mean, I'm a sports fan, so I love Sports Center this time of year because I could watch it. I was watching the highlights. I love watching those things. I love hearing about things, great things again that I might have forgotten about. So I think as we launch into today's episode, we talk about our hits from 2022 and kind of what we really were kind of coming out of COVID at the end of 2021. Right. But this has been a great year, I think, for us and a great year for investors.
Yeah, and for someone who has ADD like me, you know, I love going through a lot of topics fairly quickly. Sometimes the 20, 30, 40-minute, podcasts that I listen to, how many books we've read in the office, and I get through like the third or fourth chapter. I'm like, okay, guys, I get the point.
Yep.
We're good. I've got to move on to something else.
Point made. Yeah, moving on.
So if you're ADD like me, we're going to go through some episodes quickly just to wrap up the year and see what got most hits, most people responded to, what were most people talking about, really.
And we just want to thank everybody. We got thousands and thousands of people listening to our episodes, whether that's watching them on YouTube or listening to them on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast. That sounds like a commercial. But we do appreciate everybody's participation and your feedback on things. So.
Well, actually, 3 weeks ago, Scott, we did a podcast. It doesn't have the most views, but it was only 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But it has like the most traction.
Right.
And it was actually our shortest podcast ever. And it was the one we talked about shut your mouth.
Right.
Right.
4 minutes to shut your mouth.
Shut your mouth.
Yeah.
In other words, I love the podcast because sometimes we talk too much, and we need to do more listening. And so I'd like that one in the fact that it got a lot of traction. A lot of people listened to it, probably because it was 4 minutes, and a lot of my fellow friends are ADD like me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's really a good one. It's just we kind of had a story in there where a client of ours was giving excuses of why they were raising the rent. She wanted to, out of kindness, wanted to say why she had to do it and explain herself, and then she ended up in a fair housing lawsuit. And so the whole episode was just about, listen, we're raising rent and be done. Yeah. Be done.
I like that. That one fits nicely with another episode. We did an episode on trigger phrases, and I shared a couple of things about some of these things that I might say that my kids think is ridiculous. Right. Those are trigger phrases. But I love that episode too, because we did talk about some, I think, important things that we can say and other things that our potential tenants might say, right? We really looked at those things that, when they say certain phrases, our red flags should be going up like, what?
Yeah, I think that's a great one. If you're brand new into, this industry, I think you definitely need to watch that, because there are certain things that tenants will say that's just red flags all over the board.
Can we move in this afternoon?
Yeah.
Right? That's a trigger phrase for sure for any landlord.
We had one on in your no smoking policy, are you including vaping?
Right.
Now, listen, Scott, I'm pretty clear. No smoking, no this, no that.
Mm-hmm.
I just did a walkthrough about 3 weeks ago, and there was this oily haze all over my mirrors. And I'm like, did they try to clean it with like Windex
oven cleaner or something?
Right? And so I was kind of frustrated because it was weird. And so I got a house cleaner that I use, and I pulled in, and she's like, oh, that's vape. That's vape oil.
That's the residue, yeah.
She's like, here, smell your sheets. Smelled the sheets. They smell like marijuana. So marijuana vape oil is what these guys were smoking in my place. They'd have no cigarettes, no lighters, no nothing like that around the house, right? But they're sitting there vaping around my house, totally violating my lease. I had no idea. What's interesting is they paid me some utilities every month, and I would go by, and they'd always meet me out front to say, we just want to make it easy on you and give you, your utility payment. And, here I am giving podcasts. I think that I kind of cover my bases a lot. And yet it never dawned on me. They did not want me to step
Yeah.
foot in that house, and I should have been better about that. But we talked about vaping, and we got some hate online about, hey, it's not the same as cigarettes. It doesn't ruin your
Yeah.
home. Guys, vaping puts this oil all over the couches, the floors, the mirrors, and it is hard to clean.
Yeah, so now you're stuck with a cleaning bill or just a complete remodel, right? You're like, I got to just trash, sheets, bedding, that kind of stuff. You're like, I'm not cleaning that. Let's just.
Yeah. So important to know, how vaping affects your property,
Right.
and include that into your no smoking process. They got a lot of hits, and it's funny that we gave that podcast, and then I think a few weeks later I have this.
You're dealing with
this
it.
situation.
Yeah.
But
One of my other episodes I really loved, and I think this again fits. I think all we talk about is in such a nice little package. But one of my favorite episodes was why you should be a landlord PI, right? And that, if you were really being a landlord PI, you'd have been like, no, I'm going to come and walk the house.
Yeah.
Don't meet me out front for the check. I want to come and walk. I'm just going to do a property inspection.
Right.
Right. I'm going to be in property inspection and just going to see what's going on.
Right.
And you'd quickly would have walked in and went, oh man.
No,
Like,
totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Right. So it is important to be a private investigator mentality as a new landlord, as an existing landlord, experienced landlord. We do have to take some of those tools that we talk about and teach about and really put them into action. All the way through from the beginning of the process till the end of the process. So.
Absolutely. Hey, we talked about Section 8 a little bit. You know,
Yeah.
some of this source of income is coming across the country, which requires you to take a Section 8 housing voucher. We talked about how that's happening. We also had an episode on what we think is coming in 2023 with if you're using Section 8, you're probably going to be asked not to do background checks. I mean, that's not set in stone, but we're believing this is the way that we're going. So those are really good episodes to watch.
Yep.
Section 8, how Section 8 works. If you're thinking about Section 8, and we're not against it. I mean, we had people, say, hey, I love Section 8. I love being a landlord to Section 8. I always get my money. There's pros and cons. You just need to weigh in. I will tell you, with more people crossing the southern border, this Title 42 disappearing, these people rushing the border, there is going to be a housing issue in 2023, and the government's going to want to get involved. And you know who they're going to look at to fix that?
You landlord.
You landlords. So I would get to know Section 8. I would get to know government housing, because I think we're going to see more and more and more of that. And if you don't want it, you need to know how to stay away from it or how to price your property so you don't have to take it. Section 8, I think, would be huge to go back and revamp on that one.
Yep, for sure. Another one.
Yeah.
And this one also created a bit of controversy.
This was our most controversial one.
I think was one of our more controversial ones, and that was tenants and guns.
Yes.
Kind of our policies on tenants and guns. We had Denny, who's our legal counsel here, do that one.
Yeah.
But
so our title was Are Tenants' Guns Your Liability?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And in this generation of I'm just going to read the title and then blast you online, we got hammered. But what was funny is I agreed with most of the comments of the right to bear arms and the right. And I'm like, I kept saying, go watch the podcast.
The whole episode was right in line with their comments. We're like,
I'm not going to watch this, waste my time with you liberal, you
Yeah.
Democrat, you blah, 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 you
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. I mean, just so much hate. And I'm
Yeah.
like, if you would have listened to the podcast, you probably would not have commented
yeah,
like that.
it wasn't
you
a
know?
politicized podcast. It was just a very
It was not. It
nuts
was
and bolts, approach at how do we deal with tenants and guns.
It was pretty much a CYA. It was pretty much that if you allow them to have guns, just make sure you're covered with the key phrases in your lease, and just make sure that no liability comes back on you. We weren't saying take their guns away. They can't defend themselves if an intruder comes in. None of that. We were just pretty much saying we're responsible landlords, just going to make sure that is, T's are crossed, his I's are dotted.
Yep.
And I think that was really a fascinating podcast with a lot of meat in it.
Yeah.
And I think we gave you some, a lot of times this year we gave you some, if we were talking about a lease, we gave you sample lease language you could have,
Yep. We've got handed out some policies on some really good stuff. So.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else that you think of? Like short-term rentals got quite a bit. A lot of people are turning to short-term rentals in this economy.
Yep. Did we talk about prepaid rent already? No. But guess what? We had the most views, I think, on prepaid rent.
Yeah, that's that stop and listen before you take prepaid rent.
Yep.
And a lot of people, who doesn't want prepaid rent? Come on over and Give me as much money as you can right away. But there are some things that you need to know, and there are some laws that you possibly could be breaking if you, once again, don't have the wording in your lease and don't have certain forms.
It's interesting. We had several thousand people listen to that, and I think there's a reason, because people right now are kind of scrambling, going, what's my best approach as a landlord, right? How do I get my money?
And some people are saying, hey, listen, I know I don't have good credit, or hey, I know I don't have this or that. I will prepay the whole lease so you don't have to worry about that. And that's why we're seeing more offers of prepaid rent here.
The key takeaway there is don't ask for prepaid rent, right? It has to be offered by the tenant.
I think if there was one thing we talked about,
that was the number one takeaway.
It has to be offered. It has to be signed off to. Don't ask for it. Many times that is against your state law. So, it was a fun year. I'm looking forward to 2023. Might want to put a new intro in on there a little bit, and make a few little changes. But it's been fun, Scotty. I appreciate you being by my side here most of COVID. It's turned into.
It's been a fun run. So
it's been in a good podcast relationship. So we're looking forward to another good year of topics. With that said, I'm going to ask the people who watch and listen to us, give us some ideas of what you're running into.
What do you want to hear?
I mean, you can have a landlord who's, I've been in this business for 30 years. I haven't even seen 1/10, if that, of what goes on out there, right? I do it my way. But to hear, people call in and questions and, suggestions, we would love to hear from you and give us some topics that are going on out there. You only know what you know.
Right.
We don't.
I would love to invite people too, if they ever want to be a guest, whether that's here in person or virtually. We'd love to have some guests on as well. So
would love that. That's a great idea. So if you want to be a guest or you have some comments for us, just go ahead and reach out to us. Put it down in the comment section, and we will reach out to you. Thank you for a great 2022. 2023 is going to have challenges, but it's going to be an awesome year. And until we get there, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and continue to rent perfect.